Hello, everyone. It's an early Friday morning. I can see everybody's tired. I am too. That's why I was taking my last breath there. But welcome. We have an amazing day lined up. And I want to share first that I don't need to introduce Shantanu. He is not just a Silicon Valley giant, but a giant on the global scene in terms of creativity. He has been a transformational leader throughout his career and is highly respected for how he transforms teams. And we come back to culture and culture capital. And Shantanu has built so much of that at Adobe. From a technology perspective, first the transformations to cloud, then to creativity, and so much more that the list is endless. But I want to share with you that he is a global figure. And although we would have liked to have Shantanu in person, PM Modi was ahead of us. He called him 2 weeks ago to give a keynote at the first Waves conference in India. And Shantanu, being as gracious as he is always, said, "I'll accept the award, and I will give you 2 of my senior leaders to present and to share the journey of Adobe and their journey." So I would like you, we did get a chance to give him the award last week before he left. So if we can please play that so you can see the presentation and Shantanu's words directly. Please play that.
Shantanu, I'm so delighted to present to you the Transformational Leadership Award from TiE Silicon Valley. You have been such an icon in this community in Silicon Valley and in transforming Adobe to such a leadership position in creative and marketing industry. So thank you very much, and thank you for your immense support to TiE. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I guess. Thank you. Thank you, Anita and TiE, for this extraordinary recognition. It is truly an honor to be acknowledged by an organization that has been so instrumental in fostering entrepreneurship and innovation for over 3 decades. While I regret not being able to join you in person at TiEcon 2025, I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to celebrate this moment with all of you virtually. TiE's commitment to mentorship, education, and global networking has been a beacon of inspiration for countless entrepreneurs, and I would be remiss to not commend the organization for its remarkable impact. At Adobe, we've always believed in the transformative power of technology to unlock creativity, drive innovation, and empower individuals and businesses to achieve their full potential. From inventing desktop publishing with PostScript, to revolutionizing imaging and artistic expression with Photoshop, and to giving designers and publishers unprecedented freedom with InDesign, and then later pioneering video and gaming through Flash and electronic documents through PDF. We've now created the digital marketing category with Adobe Experience Cloud. Our journey has been defined by relentlessly trying to look around the corner and to launch transformational technologies, and a commitment to making a positive impact in society. This award is really a celebration of the incredible team at Adobe, whose passion, ingenuity, and dedication have been the driving force behind our success. Together, we've strived to push boundaries, break barriers, and create opportunities for more people everywhere. Thank you again for this incredible honor. I look forward to seeing the continued impact of TiE and this community in shaping the future of entrepreneurship and innovation. Wishing you all a fantastic conference.
I would now like to introduce David Wadhwani, who is the president of all of their digital cloud and products globally. And he has been an amazing leader and leads the largest business for Adobe. I asked him backstage, what is the one personal thing he wanted me to share with you all? It's interesting and so heartening that the one thing he chose was for me to let you all know that he was born in India. That love for where he was born and his leadership is really heartwarming. And joining him in this conversation is Asheem Chandna, partner from Greylock. Welcome, David and Asheem.
Yeah, great to see everyone. This is David Wadhwani from Adobe. I'm Asheem Chandna from Greylock. And we're going to talk a bit about storytelling. And so, excited to be here. And maybe just to start, David, let's start with your personal story.
Yeah, first of all, thrilled to be here and spending time with all of you. I think it was probably 20, 30 years ago that I came to my first TiE conference. I don't know exactly how long it's been going, but it's an organization that was really near and dear to my start in Silicon Valley, so really excited to be here. My story is probably not that dissimilar from many of yours. I was born in India. I was born in Bombay. And my parents moved to the US in the late 70s. And learned a lot, as we all have from our roots in terms of perseverance and finding ways to make yourself and remake yourself in interesting and ambiguous situations, which is really what my parents did. I went to Brown. I don't know if there's anyone from Brown here. All right, we have someone. So you definitely know Andy Van Dam, I'm guessing. Yeah. Andy Van Dam's one of the iconic professors there. When I graduated from Brown, I came and joined Oracle, and not because of Oracle. Andy took me aside and said, you are not the kind of person that's going to be a small cog in a big wheel. You have to go start a company. So actually what I did was I wrote myself a letter for the 25-year-old version of David. I opened that letter and it reminded me that I needed to go start a company. So I started a company right away. Lots of twists and turns. The company did okay, not great. But eventually I found myself at Adobe, where I think I had sort of one of the more important moments of my career. Shantanu had given me the responsibility to run Creative Suite. The business and the company at that point was about $4 billion in revenue, and we were pretty stagnant. And we had this idea of transitioning it to a subscription business, bring more people into the mix. It was a very risky
Which was very early at that time. Today that's,
Exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't that obvious back then, but as we made that transition, it worked out very well. The company's now, crossing 20 billion in revenue. And then some gentleman, Asheem, called me somewhere along that journey and just wanted to have dinner and convinced me to take over App Dynamics at the time when we started working together.
Again, with a small Chinese dinner at our offices. And,
exactly. Get careful when you get a call from a VC. That's the moral of this story. Yeah. But we had dinner. He made me. I couldn't stop thinking about the company. I think when we started working together, it was 64 million in revenue. And 4 years later, it was nearing 700 million in revenue. We had done the acquisition with Cisco. So, lots of twists and turns in my career, but always sort of, based on my interactions and relationships with people.
No, that's awesome. So what got you interested in storytelling? And maybe just talk a little bit more about, what does it all mean, and why is storytelling important?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think we all recognize, whether it's for ourselves or whether it's for our businesses, how we present and the storytelling we share is an important part of establishing ourselves. But one of the trips I took to India, I actually was for Adobe. I went back to Bangalore, and I'd become a fan of Muhammad Yunus. I don't know if folks know Muhammad Yunus and the Grameen Bank micro-lending. And he had sort of like, had this process where he lent to women, micro amounts, $10 US, I think it was the limit at the time. I went and I actually met some of the women that had borrowed money. And one of them had taken me to her place. It was a 10 by 10 apartment. They had a VHS recorder and a tube TV that she had bought using that money for her son to start a videography business, servicing the slums of Bangalore. And I remember there's a lot you can take away from that story about human perseverance, about like ingenuity, about how great the bank is in terms of giving people opportunity. But it kept bothering me, which is that they're creating this content for people who really don't have much disposable income, right? And it kind of struck me that at the end of the day, food, shelter, clothing, which is really what we need to live, is really the foundation of life. But the purpose of life is to capture those moments, share those moments, and storytelling and sharing what we believe in the passions we have is so foundational to who we are as humans that we needed to bring that back to Adobe in a richer way. That's actually one of the things, Asheem, that gave rise to the subscription model. We wanted to enable more people to participate and tell their own stories. And of course, everything we do at Adobe is around creativity for all as a result of that.
Yeah. So many of the folks in the audience are entrepreneurs or CEOs or folks working in companies, entrepreneurial companies, the folks that want to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So how should they think about storytelling?
Yeah, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, because you deal with so many different companies. But at the end of the day, you can look at storytelling as the kind of thing you do, with friends and family and your children at night. But storytelling, I think, is the foundation of how brands build themselves and how people engage. And for us, if you look at, we deal with some of the largest companies in the world. What we hear on average, by the vast majority of the CMOs we talk to, say that they're going to produce this year 2 to 3 times more content than they produced last year. And the reason for that is engaging on social, you have to move much more quickly at the pace of social. The content you publish to social has a shelf life of a week, and it's been dropping. The efficacy drops very quickly after that. And how you tell the story, how you show up is absolutely essential. If you think about the context of App Dynamics, we sold APM, we sold commodity technology, right? But we did deals that were tens of millions of dollars. And it wasn't because we sold that commodity technology, it's because we told the right story. We got people to see the power of APM. When you go into a bank, you don't sell them APM. You sell them the ability to make sure that the busiest branch, which is the 701 train from Paddington Station and your mobile app, can be running effectively and can scale to the demands of the needs of your customers. Or if you're dealing with McKesson for cancer research, you're selling them the story that their patients are never going to go without the treatment that they need because of the technology we're selling. So storytelling is an important thing whether you're a B2C or B2B company. And it actually drives not just brand recognition, but an increase in terms of the value you can get from the technology you sell.
Yeah, and maybe just to elaborate on David's story further, right? We were together at App Dynamics, and there was a moment in time where you're selling the software based on how many nodes you have, or how many servers you have, or how many application processes you have, and you can only drive pricing to a particular level, right? Maybe you're selling for 50,000, 75,000, 200,000. But then when you come into a customer and you say, hey, let me understand the business application you're running. And if you're running a business application where a lot of money is going through that, whether that's a travel service, or you take eBay, or you take Netflix, and the cost of it being down, and the minutes, the difference between bringing it back up in minutes versus hours, and then suddenly the pricing completely changes, right? And the customer realizes if you can change that, and then to David's point, just kind of almost flipping the perspective. It's the same software. And I remember that one large financial paid $50 million a year, right? And that would have never happened, right, if we were selling, the other way.
Tech and technology is one thing, but
but if you take it to the customer and the business outcome and the way they think about it, and then they can take it up their line and say, hey, this really impacts our business in a particular way.
And Asheem, I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs here. One thing I did have the privilege of doing and still work with Greylock, I spent 2 years in the offices learning about sort of investing from Asheem and Reed and David and just incredible investors, Sam. It was always fascinating to me, you see more pitches and opportunities than most people do. Storytelling is an important part of that. That's just right. Because there's so many entrepreneurs here. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so let's see. So I would say, storytelling is important. And I would say, for any business, there's a narrative and then there's numbers. And I would argue, of course the numbers are very important, but the narrative you could argue is even more important or certainly equally important. And I think when an entrepreneur comes into a room, with an investor, I'd say within the first 5 minutes, you've either established a very positive momentum, or you've created a negative kind of a scenario, and then you're trying to recover, and most people won't be able to recover, right? So it really comes down to a little bit of, I'd say, the mission orientation, and what something can become. And then the other piece is just a little bit of, why is this important to that person, right? Why are they on that mission, right? Why is it personally important? So I think those things are quite important. I'd also say, like, if you take it from a customer perspective, right? Many companies show up and they just talk about themselves and their technology. Relatively few entrepreneurs will actually think about themselves from the customer's mindset. And what problems does the customer have, right? And can you flip the story and really take the time to understand the customer and then present the story, in light of the customer? And I'd say the last piece is maybe on the employee side, right? Any great entrepreneur needs to recruit. And so it's the same thing when you're recruiting, right? How can you convince somebody to come and work on something that's much larger than themselves? And why should that person, right, kind of come to that company? And what's the challenge there? What's the learning they're going to get there versus all the other choices they have? So I think storytelling, just in all different contexts, right, is really, really important.
Yeah.
So yeah. So let's go to Adobe for a few minutes. So we're kind of in the Gen AI era and the AI era. How is Adobe navigating all of this?
Yeah, it's an amazing moment. I think a little bit about the luckiness that we've had to sort of live through many of these moments, whether it was the rise of the web, whether it was rise of mobile, now rise of AI. Yeah. I don't know if you'd agree, but of course it couldn't happen without the others, but it just feels bigger this time, and more opportunity, more disruption, everything's happening in real time, and the pace of innovation and the commoditization of like this rocket science is fascinating. So for Adobe, again, we see ourselves as one of the core anchors of how we see ourselves is that we manage the experiential data, and we build the world's content. That's how we think about it. Our digital experience products, will help you track people that are on your site or off your site to help you build segmentation. But as they do that, there's a demand for more content, right? As I talked about, more people are generating more content now, and the pace of increase of content production is going through the roof. So we break it into three categories. First is with creative professionals. What generative AI is doing is allowing us to put things in our core tools in a way that the generative, that we're giving our creative professionals even more superpower. I'll give you, a small example of this. The world, most of the video content you see is, flows through our tools like Premiere as an example. But often when someone is using Premiere to create content, they're trying to really create a vibe and an end-to-end experience so that really shows off your content. They might have a video clip of Shantanu talking for 20 seconds, and they may put some sort of background music track there. But if they don't match up, and you've got a 25-second beat where you want to change that, but you've got a 20-second clip that you want to sort of map to that, today you couldn't do anything, or yesterday you couldn't do anything. Now you can simply drag that clip out, and it'll generate an extra 5 seconds of frames so that you can sort of match these things. And so that's one example of hundreds of capabilities like that we're adding to our core tools, and that just gives creative professionals much more superpower. The second thing is the rise of agentic-based computing and the ability to sort of create your own content. We're clearly seeing a democratization where anyone and everyone is able to create this content, and we need to be able to enable them to create more content at scale so that it's not just the studio team that creates the content and does the storytelling, but everyone in the organization should be able to do that on behalf. Whether you're selling to B2B sales or whether you're B2C and you're trying to sort of build an audience, you want your employees, everyone in the company, being able to participate in that. And then last, but certainly not least, we see a demand for increased personalization. And I'll give you an example from our perspective. We have a very large moment around Black Friday, right? People come to buy Photoshop and these things, and we sell to consumers the way we do. For Black Friday, we'll create 70 or 80 hero assets. But by the time you start looking at personalization for language, for discount rates, for audiences, for preferences, and all of these things, we end up with, from 70 or 80 hero assets, we end up with 54,000 variations. So we can do much more personalization at scale to reach our customers, which shows a very significant impact in terms of conversion rates and engagement rates. And so that whole, what we call the content supply chain of taking what people have created and creating all these variations and getting them to the right segments, that foundation has also been a huge opportunity for us.
No, that's fascinating. So right before this, I was chatting with Paul Singh, who's in the audience, and we were just talking about what all this means for jobs going forward.
Yeah.
And I think Paul was saying that basically he thinks that the human interaction is going to become even more important in sales. Yeah. And he was saying like, hey, for sales and marketing, it's going to really create the need for even more people. And I was telling him, I hope that's the case, but I actually might have a contrary viewpoint,
yeah.
which is basically you can actually see a lot of these things being automated and humans still being important, but a lot of functions that are there today may actually go away. Do you have a point of view on all of this? And what's the impact of this going to be on just both creative professionals and also sales and marketing in various contexts?
Yeah, I actually, if I can, I'll agree with both of you, and I'll tell you why. Again, I think the thirst for content in our context, right? The thirst for content is exploding. As I mentioned, companies are going to double or triple the amount of content they produce this year because of the need for increased freshness, because of the need for faster campaign cycles, because of the need for increased personalization. You can't just do that with human by asking your teams to work harder, and frankly, you can't hire that many people that quickly anyway. And so I think what's going to happen is two things. One is there will be increasing automation. Right? And what we see that, right? You don't need people to take those 70 hero assets and convert it to 54,000 variations. In fact, that's a perfectly automatable task. Create 100,000 variations, because what we see is more is more. If you have better personalization, use automation to increase that personalization. But what we also see is that the zone is being flooded with content, because not only are you competing with each other for attention, but remember I told you about the story from India? You're competing with friends and family for attention. You need to reach people on social. And in order to reach people on social, you need more creative content and need better storytelling that stands out. And for that, you need creative people. So yes, we're making our creative pros more and more capable to do more. But every time we've seen that happen in industry, you've seen the result of that actually result in more jobs. Let me give you a very near and present example: streaming services. Right? What we did and what others did was we created more and more capable tools for creating video. Right? Video production costs came down because of what we were doing with technology. The result wasn't that people took that technology and just did the same amount at cheaper costs. Yeah. Many people started saying, well, how do I do more with it and change the shape of the market? I think the same thing's going to happen here. So I think you'll see cost of production coming down. You'll see creative professionals doing more creative work and sort of producing more content. And you'll see automation taking that and actually driving more personalization and scale on the back end of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So maybe just going back to Gen AI for a bit and just, LLMs. So it seems like, we're very early in these journeys. No one really knows, exactly what innings we're in. And, the watermarks on these LLMs, keep going up, right? I mean, just to throw one anecdote out, there are sets of questions that look at PhD level capabilities. And there's a bunch of benchmarks. And like 2 years ago, these LLMs were at 30%. Today, my understanding is, the same benchmarks at 70%, right? Just on, PhD level questions. And, it's not clear where this all kind of levels off. So how do you think about that at Adobe? Because the watermarks, keep going up.
Yeah. And
you're building software with new workflows. So how does one navigate that? And also, what are the workflows of the future going to look like?
Yeah, that's a really big question. Let me try to sort of articulate this. So at Adobe, we have 4 core audiences that we serve, right? We serve business professionals, predominantly with Acrobat and Adobe Express. We serve creative professionals with Photoshop and Illustrator, Premiere, After Effects, those kinds of things. We serve next generation creators with all of our Firefly next generation tools. And we serve marketing professionals with the content supply chain orientation. So the way we've kind of come at it is that we have, the first question we asked is, what do we use and what do we build ourselves? And there's a lot of regulation throwing around in the world right now about what is actually legitimately and legal use of this of Gen AI and what is not. And so we decided to go build our own foundation models. We call them Firefly. They're for imaging, they're for video, they're illustration, audio, all of those design output. So we have our set of models, but we train them on content that we know we have direct license rights to and that we've paid for in some form. So that's an important thing. Our content, anything we produce, is commercially safe. You can use it in production without having to worry about any lawsuits and legality. So that's been a huge sort of differentiator.
And how do you know it's commercially safe?
Because we have something called Adobe stock.
Okay.
And we train solely on that content, where we have intellectual rights to everything on there. You have to sign a model release form. All of that is in there. So then we integrate that into our tools. And of course, we talked about Photoshop, we talked about Express. Acrobat is one with the LLMs getting richer and richer. We've integrated this thing called workspaces, so you can pull in multiple documents and content creation, documents into a conversation. Yeah. But on the back end of it, what we see is people don't want to just have a conversation with the documents. They actually want to do something with that. So we've merged this idea of consumption and creation. So you can have a conversation, but then say, okay, now create a presentation for me on the back end. And you have that streamlined workflow that you're talking about. But nowhere is that workflow more important than in terms of a company engaging with their customers. So how do you create all of this at scale? We have something called Gen Studio. We have something called Firefly Services that lets you assemble content, resize it. So for example, on average, if a company has a video asset, but they want to resize it for all the different social networks, on average, they spend $15,000 resizing that content. We can do that for pennies, and we can do that in minutes. So creating that workflow that actually solves that last mile problem is important. The last thing I'll say also is that when you start to automate more and more, you actually need what we refer to as reflection models. A model that will look at what you created and say, can we actually release this? Because in highly regulated industries like pharma and these things, there are very strong governances around what they can actually ship. And if they trip that, they get sanctioned. And so you can have models that say, is this legally sound? You can have models that say, does this have good taste? You can have models that say, does this meet my brand requirements? And so stitching together that entire workflow is really where I think companies will set themselves apart. Because the models, to your point, are going to get more and more powerful. But solving the real problem is more than just a powerful model.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. So it looks like we're up against time. Yeah. Any closing thoughts for a quick minute?
No, so it's a dynamic time. And Asheem, you've been in this, and I'd love to hear your closing thoughts too, frankly. I'm sure they do too. But I think we've been in this world many times before, and the best opportunities really come from these moments of change. And I encourage all of you, whether you're in a larger, if an executive in a larger company, or whether you're an individual looking to disrupt the person next to you in a larger company, one of the core things is about sort of having that persistence that we started the conversation with, right? And I think we're all, in a sense, lucky to be part of a community that, frankly, in our very near past, or maybe you yourselves have seen our parents go through this fundamental set of changes and find ways amidst a lot of ambiguity. And I think we're all lucky to be in a community where we can gather like this and share that. So I think the most important closing thought is, there's so much dynamism in the market right now, but how we all, share conversations like this and how we learn from each other is what gets us through there, and then stay persistent on the back end of it.
Yeah, and I'll just echo everything David just said. I mean, I've been in venture now for 20 years and never seen, more change than, what we see today. I mean, every week, we have entrepreneurs come in, and the demos they show us, I mean, they're just kind of mind-blowing, right, in terms of, what the future looks like. So I feel like it's very safe to say, like, come back to TiE 10 years from now, there's going to be many new companies, that are going to be Silicon Valley-based, that don't exist today, that'll have huge buildings, thousands of employees. So I think we're just kind of in an amazing time, So thanks very much. And
Thank you, Asheem, and thank you to Ty, and good luck with everything. Can't wait to see what you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Great.